Hello, welcome back again to Painting with Arty Julie. Today we're going to look at this little seaside scene. Two little girls in a big cold sea just going for a paddle. Okay, let's get going. Okay, so we're going to look at doing these little girls in the paddling in the sea. I have actually done a cheat sheet for you. So if you want to download this off the website, artyjulie.com, you'll be able to find that and the instruction sheet on there. And what you do with these trace down sheets, or cheat sheets as I like to call them, the drawings, is scribble on the back with a soft pencil. It's something like a 6B or a 4B pencil. This is a graphite stick. Turn it back over, put it onto your watercolour paper where you want the picture to be, and carefully go back over the lines on here with a normal pencil, so it comes out, it'll transfer onto the watercolour paper. I just noticed I missed a bit of a neck there to put that in. Don't use charcoal on the back or anything like that, just use a graphite pencil. So now this is transferred onto my watercolour paper, and this is Bockingford 300 gram weight watercolour paper, and we're ready to start doing the painting. So the first thing we need to think about, we need to mask out or leave some sparkly bits of light onto the sea. This sea we're going to do in 3 different sections in 3 different ways. So we're going to just try and mask out some of the little bits and the girls themselves. I use masking fluid. This is just a blue coloured masking fluid. You can use a creamy coloured masking fluid, anything you like. It is like a rubber solution stuff, and will protect your paper, so you can paint over it and forget it's there, which makes life a lot easier to try and work with this. But what I do to use masking fluid is actually I do paint it on with a brush rather than an applicator or anything like that. And I take a normal size brush, just a normal paint brush, nylon-y type, wet it a little bit, take the surplus water out, and then roll it in household soap. This is just purely to protect your brush. Don't paint the soap on the paper as some people do. Just protect your brush by loading it with soap, making sure it dries out and the soap goes right up to the ferrule there. And this should protect your brush, so you've got you can really use it. You can always wash your brush out and re-soap it at any time. So I'm going to protect the inside edge, or I can actually paint out the whole of these little girls if I want to. But you can just do the inside edges. This will allow me to flick the background over them without having to make a break in the painting as I go around there. So just putting this on here, nice and thinly. Don't have it too thick, otherwise it tends to soak into the paper a little bit and might tear it. So make sure it's evenly coated on there. The neater you do this on the edges, the better it will be. Just bring it down the legs. This poor little girl looks like she's shivering in the cold water here, because the water around the English coast is always freezing, even in the middle of summer. It's always bitterly cold. So this one's got her shoulders all hunched up, going, oh my goodness me, it's freezing. But none of us can resist having a paddle when the sea's nice and rough and lively. So I'm just going round these on the inside edges. This will just protect it when I come to whack the paint on. So down there, and then what we also need to do is put a few little spots of this, down our fingers, into the water as well, to give me some little sparkly light bits onto the water. So onto this water I'm going to do some little rows of dots where the foam's coming up to their ankles, or sorry, the calf area here. So lots of little chains of dots going across here. This will just help to protect the paper and leave me some lovely little sparkly white bits on there. Not all the waves, I'm not going to do the bigger waves with this, it's just some of the little sparkly bits which would be difficult to leave out of the water if we're trying to paint around these. Make sure they're little dots, and again up into this water here, just a little way, not all the way back, we're just going up to about shoulder height. So the big waves at the back here, we're not going to put these, it's just where the sunlight's catching the water, giving you these little tiny thin bits of sparkly light there, and it makes a lovely lift to the picture if you can just do these little bits and leave them in there. I'll just carry on doing this for a few moments and then we'll have to let it dry. Okay, you can always flick a few little bits on as well. Just do that. That'll give you lots of random bits, but be careful of your clothes because it doesn't come off again out of clothing, but it does come off your paper and your furniture, but not your carpet, as I found out. Okay, so that will give me lots of lovely little sparkly bits. Doesn't matter if it goes over the children at the moment. There we go. So I'm going to leave that just to dry for a few moments. These bigger blobs here will just take a little bit of time to dry out, only a few minutes. Try to avoid drying it with a hairdryer because it may just glue the masking on there, so you don't really want to do that. I'll just clean my brush now. Now I've used that, the soap should protect it. Just give it a good wash out in normal water and it should come up nice and clean again. So this is nice and dry now, so all that masking fluid has dried out, so I can work on top of this. We're going to do the sea in 3 different sections. We're going to do the top part here onto dry paper, letting the colours blur in but leaving some little patches of white. Then we're going to do this onto wet or damp paper, and then we're going to do this in smaller sections but onto damp in different sections. And this is to try and give the effect of a bit of distance on here with the sea. Because this is rough textured paper, if we put it onto dry paper and just drag it across, it'll just catch the tops of the paper and you'll still get some sparkly highlights with it. So I'll mix some puddles up of ultramarine blue and alizarin crimson to give me a purpley colour. Ultramarine blue on its own there, a little bit of cerulean blue, and then a bit of bluey green with a blue and a yellowy colour, and then an ultramarine blue and burnt umber to give me a darker shade as well. So we're not necessarily using all the colours, but we're going to use most of them. So, right, we're going to start with the top part here. I'm just loading my brush with paint and just dragging it with the brush slightly on its side across the paper. And you'll see as it drags across there, it'll just catch the paper in some places and not in others. And this gives you the effect of the sparkle on the sea. I'm going to swap to another colour, just to get a bit of variation in that. This is my cerulean blue now, so I've used a bit of ultramarine blue. And again, same sort of things, just let the 2 colours merge and mingle. You could, if you wanted to, rub a bit of candle wax across the paper, and that again will protect your light bits there. But I find that a little bit awkward because you can't change anything if you put candle wax on. It just stays white, whatever you do to it, it will never change colour again. Then straight into a different colour. This is a bit more of a purpley colour here, and that is my distant sea. So quite quickly you can build up the bands of the distant colour here to give you the effect of the sea. This edge I'm going to have a little wave coming in somewhere around here, so just as I finish with these colours I'm just going to wobble it a little bit, just put it on a little bit more so it's not a dead straight edge to that, so just give it a little bit of a rougher edge to that, or an uneven edge I'd say to that bit across the top there. And you'll see why in a minute, because that's going to become a top of a wave. So that's my first bit of the sea done. The next bit I'm going to dampen the paper first so it blurs a bit more so I can get some bands of waves coming in. So I'm just going to dampen that. I'm going to touch that uneven edge with the water. Just let it touch up there so it runs back slightly into those water, and just softening that edge to hopefully it just gives it a bit of an effect of a wave. So I'm going to put some bands of water across here, just dampening it over across the girls. Just be a little bit careful with the girls there when you come to do those, and just bring it down to somewhere just about knee level of the girls. So now this time I'm just going to think a little bit more about where the colour's going to go. So I'm going to use a little bit of a darker colour. This will just be the underside of a wave. So again, oops, that should be wet on that corner. It's just gone onto dry paper, so I'll just wet that slightly across there. So just bringing that across, just wobbling it slightly. So this is my darker bluey grey colour. So it should look like the underside of a wave, just making sure it's not a dead straight line. You might want to put a little wiggle or two into that to make it vary a bit. Then perhaps swap to a different colour, purpley colour maybe. This is going over those little bits of masking fluid, making it look like the sparkly bits on the sea here and the extra bits of colour into it there. And then into some of the other blues perhaps. You can leave a little bit more white in between them. So whatever you do one side of a girl has got to come out the other. Otherwise it looks very peculiar. But you can see how this is nice and blurry in here. So it's giving you the softer look for the waves in there. Just get a bit more colour into that now. Whoa, that's nice. Nice bit of bright ultramarine blue there. Into that. Across there. Whatever you do one side of a girl has to come out the other. I'm not painting through the girls because I only put masking around the inside edges of those, so they're still unprotected in the middle part. This is lovely bright colours, so you can make these colours lovely and vibrant if you want to. Let's go back to put a little bit more of the grey colour in there. Just a bit more of that, and then perhaps swap to a different blue, a cerulean blue perhaps, to give you a bit of colour. It's quite surprising how vibrant all these colours are when you come to look at the sea on a nice sunny day. It's rough. I'm going to just put a little bit more of the ultramarine blue in there, then perhaps I'll leave a little bit of a gap. This is starting to dry now, so I need to just be a little bit more quick with this, putting the paint on. You do have to paint this at some speed, otherwise it starts to dry out. So where did I throw my mop brush? There it is. Just below here I'm just going to run some water, don't put it into the paint, just put it below the paint and put some bands across here of water. So this is working right down to the front now. Just touch it up to that water in some places so it just blurs a little bit, keeping it soft. And again, now this time I'm just going to leave a gap and put in a little bit of the dark. Again, wobble it a bit so it's not a dead straight line. This is the bottom of a wave because it will go a bit darker. So make that uneven a little bit. So just put a little wobble in there occasionally to make it look like the bottom part of a wave rolling in. Then perhaps go back to your purples or your blues. Again through there. So you're just going for it with these lovely bands of different colour, nice and bright, making this sea look quite vast and scary. Up to the girls there. And perhaps I'm going to leave a little bit more of a light bit again. Back to this darker tone to put the curl underneath the wave. So this is the top part of a wave, so just underneath a wave here. Whoops, I'm starting to dry out. I'll just put a bit more water on. This has to go onto wet to keep it all soft and blurry. So again, just making sure this stays wet. The better quality of the paper you have, the longer it stays wet. So if you go up a grade of paper, it'll stay wetter longer, which is always very useful when you're doing things like this. And again, I'm just dotting in some of the darker shades now to give it the effect of these little waves, and leaving some light bits in between these, making it more exaggerated now with the gaps in between it, so it'll look like the little waves coming in over the shore. And some little bits of dark just below the legs there. Again, wherever you put a little band of masking fluid, make sure you've got some little bits of dark underneath it to show it up. And then perhaps back to the blue, a couple of streaks of that. And a bit of the cerulean blue, just to finish that off down the bottom. So I'd leave it at that now. that's going to be enough colour into that. It should start to look like the waves rolling in there without being a painting of a wave, which is a different type of thing. It's just giving you the effects of those. Just put a little bit of dark in there as well. So I'm going to leave that to dry again for a few moments, or you can dry it with a hairdryer. Make sure that you take any little puddles out of it before you start to dry it, otherwise you'll get a wave where you weren't expecting it. Okay, so I'll just give that a little bit of a dry now with a hairdryer. Okay, so that's nice and dry. So I've just been rubbing the masking off. So I'll just finish doing that. So just firmly rub all this masking fluid off, and you can see the girls are nicely silhouetted there, and you've got lots of lovely sparkly white bits, which is just like the spray that you get from the sea. And I think that's quite nice to see that, quite effective with that water splashing up there like that. So now we can start to work on the little girls themselves. So the little girls, we're going to put the shadows in first on the little girls, because it does help to see where the shaping's going to go, and then we can just flood it with colour afterwards. So all I'm going to do with this is use a little bit of ultramarine blue, not too strong on that, but a little bit of ultramarine blue paint, and we're just going to put in where you think it's going to be a lot more shadowy, like the edge of this hair. It's going to be darker as it's the sun shining this way. So we're just putting a little bit of shadow onto the front of her face here. Surprisingly, just a very weak bit down the front of her face, so the little ears, and that will catch a little bit more light. Into the back of her hair here to give us, you can always put a bit more dark in afterwards when you've finished as well, but it just helps to give them a bit of shaping. If it was a bit bigger, I would probably dampen areas first to put them on. But for this, because it's so small, it doesn't really matter if you just put a little bit of shadow onto the dry paper for this. So the ultramarine blue down her arms, where it's in shadow down the front of her arms here, that's just a little bit strong, so I'm just going to clean my brush and just soften that a little bit. So it can get a little bit confusing as to what's sea and what's arm at this point. So let's just put that in a little bit down the shadow under her neck here. Into the clothing, let's do a little bit down the legs, and a little bit into the clothing, just down the front edges, just to give you the shapes into that. This girl, again the same on the other girl, just put the blue shading around the side of her head, into a bit of her hair, down this arm, it's most of that arm because it'll all be in shadow pretty much, perhaps a little bit there where it's catching the light, a little bit under her fingers, and a little bit down this side of her arm, a few folds in the creases into her skirt here, where she's lifted her skirt up to avoid it getting too wet with the waves, onto a little white blouse, quite a bit on here, because it's all the colour we've got on this shirt will just be left as the weak blue colouring on there. In fact, I might put a little bit of cerulean blue into that as well. Under the hair with that, just give her some creases and folds into that shirt there. And again, down her legs, whoops, want the ultramarine blue now for that one. Not too strong, but again, I don't like that. I'm just going to take that out because it's the wrong colour. Just use the ultramarine blue down the leg, just on the one side to give the shape of the leg there, because the sunlight's catching this side, so you just want it on the other side of the leg and where it goes into the shadow. So again, once that's dry, we can start putting the colour on. And when you're doing people, what I tend to do is do the body first and put the clothes on top. So with that, you want a little bit of burnt sienna, perhaps a little bit of burnt umber as well to put that back over the shadow. So just a weak bit of burnt sienna. So I'm going to go over the face and the hair, where those shadows are. Make sure those are all dry, your shadows and everything first. So over everything with that, so there's a little bit of this orangey reddish brown colour, these little wisps coming out into the background here. You can do that with the burnt sienna colour, to give her the, looks like the wind's blowing and whipping up off the sea there. And again, we're going to come back with a bit of burnt umber and do some shading into that in a moment. But we can put that colour down the arms. Now with the arms, I'm just wetting that with the burnt sienna colour. And then I'm going to take a little bit of stronger burnt umber. And where those shadows are, just touch it into that so it just helps to make that look a little darker. Round by where the shadows are. And give a bit more shaping to her hands and things. Perhaps just under her neck as well. Same with this one on the legs. A bit more burnt sienna. So I'm just wetting it with the burnt sienna. Don't do it too strong, otherwise you look very badly sunburned. So I'm just doing that with the burnt sienna. So while that's still wet, I'm just putting a bit of burnt umber into where the shadows are, just make it even darker. So it's the same with this other girl. I'm just going to do the arms first, or even the hair. I'll just put the hair onto dry paper, flicking that back as if there's a few strands coming out over all of her head. I'm going to put the hair on in completely in a minute, so that's just the undercoat. And again, flicking this out over her back here where the hairs are going wispy, blowing in the wind. With a little ponytail there, take some of the puddles out of that. Using that burnt sienna again. Over the arms, that one's disappearing into her skirt. I'll probably do the two at once for this. Burnt sienna down over the arms. While that's still slightly damp, I'm going to just tickle in a bit of burnt umber. Continuing down this one on the legs. With the burnt sienna on first, while that's still wet, we'll just tickle in a little bit of the burnt umber. Make that look a little bit more shady around in the shadowy areas. Again, last leg here. Burnt sienna on first, while that's still wet, tickling a bit of burnt umber. A little bit stronger burnt umber to give her the shadow over those shadows that we've already put in there. By the time we got round to doing those bits, this area should be dry, so I can just carry on going onto dry paper now, giving her some extra little curls with the bits of burnt umber, just shaping that, leaving some of that burnt sienna showing through, but you're just building up a little bit of the shaping into the hair, giving it a few little different shades, especially where it's a bit darker. And you can just form the shape of her head, or the hair going over her head, leaving it a little bit lighter on the top, darker on the bottom bit. We can come back and add a little bit of ultramarine blue and burnt umber to this, but you probably find you have to let that dry a bit first before we can do that. So just a little bit there, perhaps a little tuft or two coming up the top. Same with this girl now. We're going to put in a bit of the dark burnt umber, the dark brown colour, onto her hair, onto dry paper now, building that up and round. Again, a few flicks of that into the hair. As long as it's dry, you can keep building that up. And again, we'll come back and put a little bit of extra dark into that as well in a moment. A few little wispy bits there. Let's put some clothing on them. So any colours you like for the clothing. I'm just going to use a little bit of, I don't know, yellow ochre or something for the top on this one. Onto dry paper, just over the back here. For that little top, it's going over those shadows I previously put on. I can't do the blue one because that will run into her little shirt I put on there. So perhaps we'll do a little bit of a pinky skirt on this girl. And again, you want just a couple of different shades. I'm just using a bit of alizarin crimson, going over those shadows, where it goes over the shadows, it will go a darker purpley colour, which is great. It will give it a shadowy look. Bringing that one up over this one. But there, where the shadows are, I'm just going to increase the colour of the alizarin crimson. So while that's still damp, some richer, stronger alizarin crimson into that, if I can get it going a bit more. Into those shadowy bits. A little bit more shadow down that side to give you the shape of that one. I'll just put a little blue trousers on this girl, so I'm going to use the cerulean blue for this because it's a little bit different to the background blue. So straight onto the dry paper, avoiding the hands now. And again, just putting that all over her little shorts there. Dry the brush, take a little bit out where it's lighter, and then I'm just going to tickle in a little bit stronger paint over where I put the shadows previously, making that a bit darker in some places to give it a bit more shaping. Last little bits now is a little bit of ultramarine blue and burnt umber, quite strong, and putting a few little extra bits of dark into the hair to give it a bit more shape. Just a few little flicks in the darker areas. Onto the dry paper now. Just a little bit more shaping. Perhaps a little bit on this one. Ultramarine blue, burnt umber. And then just a flick or two more down here. Just a tiny little bit on a hand, which I've made to look like a little bit of a claw, which is unfortunate, but it should be all right. And that is just about it. Two little girls in a big wide sea. Right, I hope you enjoyed doing that. Don't forget you can subscribe to my channel artyjulie.com, and also on the website you can have the instruction sheets and a little drawing which you can download off the website artyjulie.com. Thank you. Bye.